Torres, a Colombian-born poet and visual artist who now lives in Copenhagen and is talking to us from lockdown in Copenhagen today. But let's have a chat. So, Ellie, what is it creatively and professionally that you do? How do you spend your time?
Yeah, okay. So apart from my official name, which is Elizabeth Torres, I like to call myself Madam Neverstop. And it's a name that I didn't just give myself. It is part of a very important project that I started several years ago called the Neverstop Project with a partner who is also a musician and who with me developed this idea or this philosophy that the process is the product and the product is the process. So what is the process when it comes to me? It is an all, circular, constant activity type of process where I write poetry, I translate poetry, I write about poetry and collaborate with poets and other translators, and all of this all of these interactions turn into a magazine called Red Door Magazine, which I started in 2009 when I lived in New York, because I saw that there was a lot of creatives in all the communities that I was visiting during my trips that I could tell about to other communities who were doing similar projects. So that's one part. But then now that I'm living here in Copenhagen and the times have changed and the technologies have evolved, I realized that I can also do a podcast. So my podcast is called Red Transmissions. I've had it for a year now. And since that was not enough for me, of course, I'm also a multimedia artist. So I do everything related to video and animation and illustration and graphic design, web design, and handmade objects of all sorts, like really strange, weird things. And I do this just to take my brain off of the computer. And I'm a typewriter collector, so I also do poetry through typewriter cutout technique and everything just related to visual arts. That's pretty much it, I think, except for the poetic phonotech, which we can talk about in a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll come back to the phonotech. But when you spoke about the Neverstop project, then to begin with, you mentioned translation. You mentioned your own poetry. You mentioned that you were a multimedia artist and you were connecting with other creative communities and connecting them. But how else, pre-lockdown, how else did that manifest itself physically? I mean, the visual arts, you are a visual artist. You've just shown us some of your weird sculpture as well. But in terms of gallery space and physical events,
Yes.
how do those link into the Neverstop project?
Okay, so the Neverstop project originally was a project created by Brandon Davis. He's a Texan-born artist who believes in the philosophy of being a nomad, of having no borders. And back in 2009, 2010, we got together and decided to collaborate as Red Door and Neverstop and became a couple. So we were the Neverstop project together. The idea was to create a musical performance that was also filmed so that it was a one-shot type of performance. And the Neverstop concept is everything that happened during that whole performance and movement, kind of like a circus or like an orchestra when it's moving through a city. All of that was documented, and there was no edits afterwards. That was it. So that's where Neverstop started. And then after we split up, our bands separated and ended, life moved on, I realized it would be kind of really absurd to stop being Miss Neverstop, right?
Yeah.
So
Neverstop never stops.
I can't stop. So he forgot, he moved on to other projects. Now we collaborate again, but I remained Miss Neverstop. And then once I turned 30, I announced publicly that I needed to age elegantly. Therefore, which is why I am now Madam Neverstop, so that it's more, contemporary to me and my own process. But when it has to do with poetry and when it has to do with performance, most of the year I'm participating in poetry festivals and cultural festivals and in other types of events as a speaker also. and as a performer. And in all of these actions where I'm sharing my poetry, I'm also documenting the people that I encounter. So I carry my equipment with me, and I'm always trying to network and bring them back to the projects that I am creating, so that it's always self-feeding, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. How long is that history of both poetry and performance for you as an individual, as a human being?
My life is a very weird life. I have a very strange story, because I started writing poetry when I was a child. I remember my mom having a typewriter around. She and my father are lawyers, so that's what they use the typewriters for. And I came up with fake case files in type of poetry to tease them, and that's how I started writing poetry. But I was born in paradise, while paradise was at war with itself. So I like to say, when I introduce myself, that I'm a child of the war. Social conflict of Colombia has been existing for more than 50 years and continues to do so. And once I started talking about these subjects from the perspective of a child, apparently it hit a nerve and people started listening. And I ended up um, publishing a book thanks to the culture ministry of the Department of Colombia, where I grew up, of where I was born, Cundinamarca. And soon after, the book won a National Poetry Award by the Colombian Book Chamber, which was huge, because they didn't know that I was 8 years old, and it boomed big time. So I became a national niña poeta, a poet child, traveling around with the big stars, the big writers of Colombia, and performing in stadiums and speaking in all the national TV programs, and therefore receiving life threats to me and my family. So thankfully, there was an article about me on the main page of one of the main newspapers of Colombia, which was seen in Miami. And then this very famous TV program, they saw me and they invited me over to Miami. So I traveled with my family as a guest of this TV show, and upon arrival, applied for political asylum. And that's how one becomes a political refugee. Which was chaotic, because then I had to learn a new language and a new existence, and try to figure out how to continue my who was I, and what was I doing exactly. But it turns out that war hadn't just stayed in Colombia. There were all these refugees before me who were now immigrants, who had moved to Miami and who had talked about the things that moved them. So there were other immigrants from other countries who also were moved by my story. So I began to build a following in Miami, and ended up having a radio show in Miami when I was 11 years old, which won first ratings, and on Saturdays at 11. It was the one most listened to in Spanish. And then we ended up moving to New York, and I grew up then in New Jersey, where once I learned English, I began publishing in English and winning awards also in that language. And then at some point I got bored of the New Jersey life and moved to New York.
Yeah, you've been a refugee constantly, it seems. I was going to say adult life, but since being quite a young child. Now, how long have you been settled in Copenhagen?
So I think now it's been almost 5 years that I'm officially in Denmark, but I came to Denmark before and fell in love with it, and decided I need a new place to stay. The problem is, even though America, the United States, prides itself for its freedoms, it lacks so many of them that there is this feeling, or there was this feeling of constant persecution while I was there, that it made no sense. Why on earth would I leave a country at war to be in a war that is not spoken? And if you're a queer artist, if you are a minority, a woman, or a person of color, or neurodivergent, or so many other categories that make you a little bit different, then you're not precisely welcome. So it felt like maybe it was time to leave the United States and move towards more open-minded society, which I think I have found.
Good.
Ish. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, you can smoke in bars.
Yes, I can.
That's what I was with you.
And I can drink outside. Hey, and I can marry people of my same gender if ever it comes to that, then excellent, you know. There's so many other freedoms that are more important than just the smoking and the drinking, which are the most obvious at the beginning. But the fact that I'm not being stopped every couple of weeks when walking around just because I look different by the police, you know, it's a great, fantastic feeling. I have forgotten how it feels to be catcalled when I walk around.
Yeah.
Just because I'm a woman, and things like that, they really affect your self-esteem. And I have a base of safety. I have health insurance. Even if for some reason I lose my job, or you know, I'm unemployed right now because of the COVID situation, but all these things, they do not mean the end of me. My life is not in jeopardy at the moment, like it would have been if I was in the United States. Here, there's a foundation, and it sucks that countries that have such power, like the US, can't figure it out yet.
How does that sense of security, how does that affect your creative work? What has been your creative output over the last, let's say 5 years, since you've been in Copenhagen, in terms of volume, in terms of collections, visual art? How is your creative output looked over the last 5 years?
Yeah, so people say that artists need a crisis in order to create, and I call absolute bullshit. Because when I am struggling economically or mentally or emotionally, I can't create a damn thing. I can't cook. You know, I burn the food I'm making.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, during these 5 years that I have been here, I have also experienced some harsh times in Denmark as well. I have experienced the loss of a partner, which was very difficult. And I'm still a temporary immigrant, a temporary resident here, which means that I don't get the same benefits as people who are allowed to permanently live here and work here and receive benefits in situations like this one. What I'm trying to say is my creation speed is not at its max, which is going to be absurd when I tell you what I have done in the last 5 years, because I have created indeed the podcast. The magazine has maintained itself for the last 10 years, so 5 years of that has been a ton of issues, international issues and festivals. I have performed in Latin America and Europe, most of Europe and some of Latin America. I went back to Colombia for the first time in 10 years to one of the most important poetry festivals there. I got my Danish publication. It's a compilation of my poetry in Danish and Spanish. It got published by an independent publisher here in Copenhagen. And I have also published a book called In the Jaws of Oblivion, which is in English and Spanish. And it also comes with illustrations. This was published in Puerto Rico. So I did that, and I wrote possibly 4 or 5 other books. I'm a bit crazy.
4 or 5.
Just happened to, you know, bump into a book. So 2 books are coming out this year during pandemic, which is absurd, and also it makes a lot of sense because they're books that talk about, it's kind of like a trilogy, with the Jaws of Oblivion being the first of the trilogy, where I take out all this grief and sorrow and pain, uncertainty of being an immigrant, of being a daughter, of being a wife, of being a widow, of being a lover. All of this, I take it out and turn it into a trilogy of books. And the second one is called The Ways of the Firefly, which directly talks about my healing process and recovering myself to the point of functioning. So the only thing I could do was just write, and I wrote, and it turned into a book that is incredibly powerful. I'm super proud of it because I didn't know I could be so brutally honest. And that comes out in German and English.
Yeah.
And then at the end of the year comes out another book, which is called Would You Like to Come Home? And this is my more spiritual type of connection with my own brain and with my coping with the loss of not just the partner that passed away, but another partner who was my first love and best friend, who died in New York. And how do you communicate with these losses when you know these people aren't there anymore? And all the other dead people from before that, because in Latin America, death is a constant, of course, but death is also a beautiful process. And my way to process it was to learn from the Tibetan Book of the Dead, and the Egyptian Book of the Dead, and the books of the dead of the Latin American culture as well, and make my own Book of the Dead.
Yeah, yeah.
So those are the two books that are coming out, and then I have two books that are in contests right now.
Sure.
So yeah, I haven't been at my peak, but I've been creating.
Plenty going on. Yeah. Well,
Yes.
I mean, you said, I mean, the relevance of some of that content to now, as you point out, is really, really pertinent. I'm talking about how we feel in these times, and
Exactly.
but also your process is very relevant, and I'm sure lots of the people listening will empathise with that. That no, I can't be creative in a crisis.
Exactly.
Even though we're told that a crisis is what generates our creativity. So again, people will identify with that. I wanted to go back because you and I started talking about your forthcoming book launch in the pandemic.
Right.
Before we started the interview, and so it seems as you were just talking about that book,
right.
Can you tell us a little bit about that specifically now?
Yeah. So we're talking about the pandemic. There's two things that I want to talk about when it comes to this lockdown process, and one of them is, of course, these books, and then afterwards, I want you to remind me to talk about the phonotheque. So when it comes to the book, the two books that are coming out with a publishing project called Moloko Print, Moloko Recording. And this is a German experimental type of a publication house, which is doing an amazing job of finding all these interesting artists, underground artists, outsider artists, but also doing such collectible stuff that they are publishing new William Burroughs publications. And then it's also with translations to German. And then for me, this is very inspiring because the beat poets and William Burroughs and his cutout technique are very influential in my book, in my work, I mean. And we were supposed to launch the second book, the Would You Like to Come Home, during the 50th anniversary of the Beat Poets, the Beats Poets Convention, the 50th anniversary of the cutout technique of William Burroughs. It was going to be in Paris this September. So rather than these things actually happening, I get to celebrate at home alone. So I have accepted the reality of live streaming. It's difficult to sit in front of a computer to talk to a machine for people like me who really appreciate human connection. I thrive with an audience and the human interactions and conversations. That's what feeds my brain and spirit. So talking to a machine, yes, I can see you right now, but it isn't the same. I'm still in a room completely alone. And live streaming, I have been avoiding it like wildfire throughout this, because it's also very exhausting for my eyes and for my head. But I give up. I'm joining in the party. So I've been teaching myself how to live stream the last couple of weeks, experimenting with a ton of different apps and platforms and also microphones and whatever, and putting it together so that the celebrations of these books can still happen via live streaming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what other projects have you managed to adapt to a different channel, or what new projects have you engaged in because of the situation, and how also, because as you said, we're currently to a large degree unemployed, how have you utilized any digital channels to try and survive commercially? All of those questions, answer now.
All of this. So when I was a child in Colombia, I used to visit this place in La Candelaria, which is a little part of Bogota that is very folkloric and colorful and artistic. There's a house called Casa de Poesía Silva in honor of the poet José Asunción Silva, who is a classical, beautiful poet in Colombia. He's not a classical poet, so I will have to figure out exactly what movement he's considered from. But his name is José Asunción Silva, and his poetry was beautiful. He's classical to me because I was a child when he was already dead. Anyway, in this house, apart from a beautiful indoor garden, there was a room called La Fonoteca. And the Fonoteca was a place where you could go to the desk and tell the woman, I would like to hear maybe possibly Pablo Neruda or Gabriela Mistral or some other poet, and she would give you a cassette, and you would go with this cassette, and then you would put it in the cassette player and grab the headphones and sit and listen to them. And I loved the Fonoteca because it allowed me to hear the voices of all these people who wrote, and I dreamt of being a poet, so it made sense to want to hear and suck it all in. And I've always wanted to somehow revive that experience, but it was something that I never processed completely. I just thought that it would be nice.
Yeah.
Then the lockdown happened, and I'm very aware that many artists have lost their opportunities to perform, and they're also losing economic funds. But more important than that is the people who only are comfortable in cultural environments like poetry readings and music performances and all sorts of cultural events as their social life, but don't really go out much more than that due to age or mental issues, or just because it pleases them to do just that. And I realized there's a lot of poetry that we're missing out on right now, all of us at the same time, not just the ones we're not writing, but all the poetry we're not hearing from all these festivals we're not attending. The only way to put it together was through a poetic phonotech, which is an absolutely virtual project. Through Red Door, which is the host, the magazine is the host because it's a huge website, so I can thankfully house it there. I have sent out an open call to poets all around the world to send me their poetry in their own voice as an audio recording. And to make it super easy, it's just a WAV file or an MP3 that is maximum 4 megabytes. So only a minute or more, a couple minutes of recording from their phone, sent to my email, and then I receive it. And then I add it to the collection with the location where they're from and where they reside. And this is important only because I want to document our current locations. How many places on earth are we all alone at?
Yeah.
And this open call has been going on for a little over a month, but we have already we're almost reaching 70 poems. I have received poetry from Zanzibar and from Serbia and Mexico, lots of Dominican Republic and Wales, and the United States, and of course Colombia, and poetry from all these languages and locations. And one thing that is very interesting is people who, because of their age, are not used to doing audio recordings. So they send me these emails. Did you get it? Did you receive it now? I will call my grandson and tell him to help me. Did you receive it now? So I'm communicating with all these poets from all over the world and all these varied ages. And they're sending me a little bit of them for this collection. And there are others who completely alone at home can just sit at this, like in front of this website for free and click play and have us all as company.
And lots of those poets, lots of us are going through learning processes as how to communicate differently. I don't just mean learn how to use new technology necessarily, but I mean learn how to use that effectively and with emotion and to use that technology to communicate properly. It's a new way of
exactly.
Yeah.
The very interesting thing is that when you hear the poetry that is being sent, you receive also all these channels of information, the movements. Is it experimental poetry? Does it involve music that they make it themselves? Is it just a radio playing in the background? Oh, they're rhyming. Oh, they're more, traditional. What messages are they discussing? And I think in the future, it will be able to be cataloged by themes, because there is so many emotions going through all of us right now that is what we're talking or not talking about. And I think it's a very interesting way to map our poetic existence and also our emotions and situation at the moment. So my dream is to, hopefully, I'm applying for some funding, Nordic funding, to see if I can build physical phonotheques, in order to have physical phonotheques in specific galleries and locations in Nordic countries. So with partners like Cultivera and Tranos, and in Norway and in Finland as well. And my husband, he is a sound engineer, so he can help me build this machine that I am inventing, so that we can pick up the phonotheque and listen to some poems from all over the world, but also somehow record. And the partners in these galleries send it to me, so that I can continue multiplying the phonotheque, therefore integrating the virtual with the real reality.
Yeah. And of course, the people, well, you and I are speaking to each other now, but we know that this is going to be shared wider, and we're hoping that those people who are listening will participate as well. And I'm thinking we're learning about using this technology now, and I really feel like the web address for the submission link should be moving across the screen now in text in front of you as well.
Right.
Maybe we'll try and put that on afterwards. I don't know.
Yeah, so reddoormagazine.com is the one that is the easiest to memorize, because there you can see the quarterly magazine that has all the updates, but you can also find the phonotheque there, and you can also find the podcast.
Yeah.
And if you just look up the handle Madam Neverstop, then on Instagram and Facebook and YouTube, you can find me. There's also, because you asked a very wide question, what are you doing to survive? So one part of what I am doing is I have joined the Patreon platform. And this is a platform for independent creators who invite their already achieved audience. So it's not new people who find them, but the audience that already that they're connected to. They invite them to Patreon to become their supporters, kind of like back in the day there was the Medicis and all these other families that supported artists and believed in their work and said, here you go, but in a more logical way. So it's only $3, $6 and up, depending on what people choose. And based on those levels of support, which you yourself as an artist get to choose, they receive a certain content, which is the content that you decide to create. So live streaming, if you're good at that, or if it pleases you. I'm doing a lot of writing articles about the current projects I'm involved with, and the people I'm involved with in these collaborations. I recently released, for example, an anthology of super contemporary poetry from Peru and the United States, which was made by Noah Cicero, a well-known American author, and the editor Alejandro in Peru. So they gathered this uber contemporary poetry that represented Peru and Latin America in not just English and Spanish, but also in Quechua. And then they called for translators, which is how I came to be involved. And they have published this book and allowed me to release a PDF as one of my gifts to my patrons, to my supporters. So these things I'm doing and then I receive a monthly income. It depends on the amount of supporters, and then that immediately goes to the expenses of hosting and managing the website and so on. Yeah. So that one is also Madam Neverstop. Okay. Everywhere, just Madam Neverstop or Red.
Yeah, all these links we will. I will share. You can email everything across to me, and we'll share them with the group, with the cohort, because I'm sure they'll want to follow up with more questions. It feels like that time in the interview when you sort of say, all right, has anybody in the audience got any questions? And
yeah.
No, it's just you and me in the room together now.
Right.
But I want to go back very quickly. What was the language you mentioned when you were talking about the Peruvian?
Quechua.
Yeah, what language is that?
So Quechua is
it a dialect?
No, it's a language. It's a Peruvian. I believe there's more than 50 languages in Peru alone, and around 200 languages in all of
Yeah.
Latin America. So indigenous languages. And I know nothing of this, unfortunately. Too conquered.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. It's interesting because I mean, you are a translator.
Yeah, but
And
only from
not
Spanish to English.
yeah.
Yeah, but it was really nice to translate some of the. I believe it was the one of the Peruvian authors to English for this anthology. Yeah.
Okay, well, we've spoken lots about many of the engagements that you've had, and particularly now the channels you're using to carry on with your projects. Just in general, could I ask about performance, perhaps, or more so about engagement with people, whether that's with an audience or with fellow writers, and any experience you've had of that in either residencies or in festivals, because you've appeared at lots of festivals for sure.
Yeah, I have been to tons of festivals, and I have to say one of the best experiences recently was the Tranos Fringe Festival, and it's interesting because one of the main reasons why I liked it was that, of course, it wasn't just focused on poetry, because if you attend a poetry festival, it can get really exhausting. And then once you're done with the festival, you almost hate poetry temporarily, and then you need a detox. But when it's a French festival, then you have also access to music and to film and to people who are not just all about one subject. So I really enjoyed that, but I also enjoyed the people behind it. This is how I got to know you and go shopping with you for groceries, and met Mel and Colm and everybody else in this group, And coming back, I realized that it wasn't going to be the last time I saw you guys. So that was incredibly special. And there is another French festival that really moved me, which was the Macau French Festival in China.
Yeah.
And it was exactly because of the same reason. And because of the artists that I met there were completely about the subculture that is not allowed to be spoken of publicly. So to see that in spite of all the government control, all the silencing, they are still doing all they can to document and to create and to bring the resistance in art and in culture. It moved me and it changed me. I believe that these festivals are incredibly important, not just for the general public to have access to international performers and to local work, but it is equally educational and important for those of us who are a part of it, because we learn simple things like how to read our poems properly, or how to perform in public, or the many ways we can collaborate with one another, and how to make the world a better place through our collective actions.
Wow. Yes, that sounded like a perfect summation. Okay.
Yeah.
I was going to say, have you got any more important messages from Copenhagen for us? But what could be more important than that?
Yeah, I think right now there is a tendency at the moment, when you scroll endlessly on social media, to brag about the productivity levels of people, how many of them are learning a new language at home, or learning how to code, or becoming programmers, or learning social media marketing. And even I, who say I have been quite productive because I've been teaching myself here and there some things, I'm in a personal way completely blocked. And I don't usually have writer's block, but I am blocked, whereas it's been several months and I cannot write a poem yet. So what I'm trying to say is, it's not a competition about trying to make yourself a better something superhuman now that you have some time off the public. Right now, it's not about launching your next marketing great idea or startup or your next project. It's about surviving. It's about realizing that whether we like it or not, we are all grieving. We have all lost a lot in our communities, actual humans, or families and relatives or friends, or if we haven't been touched by this, we have lost anyway, because there are many of us who are gone, and not just that, but paralyzed. And it's necessary to take a deep breath and just take it one day at a time, until we feel it's okay to slowly start moving again. And we can't force that. You cannot force a creative process into your head, and you cannot force yourself into superior existence, because that doesn't exist.
No.
So that is my message. Take it easy. We'll be all right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cheers, Madam Neverstop. Thank you so much. We'll be in touch again soon. And it's
Absolutely
lovely to see you.
Lovely to see you too. And looking forward to reconnecting in real reality.
Yeah.
The simple things need no explanation. They have very little in common with the language we use to mimic formal communication. It matters not whether we believe, we proceed, we inhibit, we keep to ourselves, we try, we say never mind, we keep safe distance, we jump to abyss in weekly loop, we make ourselves better based on book of instructions, we remember, we remember, we remember, we release it, we fix it, we make it doable, we dismiss it, we declare war or apologize profusely or act like it's never been there, act like it's never been there, we dance to songs that speak about it without leaving public traces, we read it on the news or pretend it lets us see it. It matters little whether or not the scars are visible, whether or not others can see them, whether or not we dare to caress them. I know of some who've spent a whole lifetime telling stories to cover up the facts for the sake of entire worlds of non-basic, safe existence. There are tales we never need to let go of, there are rivers we never move on from, there are voices and silences and shattered pieces of glass within the skin and Sunday nights and phone calls that never happen, and uncomfortable interactions and animal footprints and catastrophes and winters we need not recover from. There's one image of you, and maybe more. But see, the ritual consists of repetition. It matters not whether you howl or I replay in my head the things that are. The music is still louder. The rivers never stopped flowing. The light always got in, somehow. The music is still louder. The rivers never stopped flowing. The light always got in, somehow. The music is still louder. The rivers never stopped flowing. The light always got in, somehow. The music is still louder. The rivers never stopped flowing. The light always got in, somehow. The music is still louder. The rivers never stopped flowing. The light always got in, somehow. 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 The light always got in. 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 Somehow, 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 somehow. The simple things need no explanation. Need no explanation. Need no explanation. Need no explanation.